Merry Christmas, one and all. Welcome again to another edition of Talking Out Loud with me, Roger Cressey. Hope you're all doing well on this festive occasion. Christmas Eve, 2018. Quite the time. And quite in fitting with the most wonderful time of the year. We've got a pod from Wakefield, Yorkshire. Now, this was taken in January of this year and is with my great uncle Rog and Auntie Barbara. So my uncle Rog, born and bred Yorkshireman, and my Auntie Barb, a Sydney sider. So it's an interesting dynamic, I must say. It's quite fitting in as much as my uncle is a ordained canon of the church. So we get into pretty deep water when it comes to the church. About midway through the pod, we'll be chatting about how he views Jesus, Christ, and indeed the church. So really quite big topics we're tackling in this one. We'll also hear from Auntie Bob, who is quite the traveller. We'll be hearing about her favourite travelling spots. Also occasionally her waxing lyrical about Australia, of course, specifically Sydney. But it's fascinating stuff. It really is. From her first trip, at 20 years old, back in 1956, on what's changed since then, in terms of London, in terms of the generation now, how it is to travel, compared to how it was back then. So it's really, really insightful actually. I got a hell of a lot out of this conversation, and it is still to date one of my favourites. And finally, there's a lovely little plug at the end for Roger Cressey's very own children's book, The Talking Giraffe. Now this is all about a giraffe called and it's this very giraffe's adventure from the plains of Kilimanjaro to Yorkshire and back. A great read, it really is, written and illustrated by Roger himself. I would absolutely recommend a read. You can get it on Amazon. There will be a link which I'll put in the show notes. It's a real steal out there. Kindle edition, £3.21. Get involved. It's a real heartwarmer, I must say. So once again, I really love this conversation, I must say, with two very lovely people, and I hope you do too. So it's a bit of a heavier one, but we hit some big topics, and it certainly made me think. So do enjoy this as ever. Write in, let me know, give me your thoughts on anything Bankwood Bear, anything Talking Out Loud, and if you do want to host your own Talking Out Loud episode in the new year, just get in touch. Hit me up, you know where to find me. But for now, I'll leave you on a nice Sunday afternoon in front of a fire with a cup of tea, chatting to two pretty extraordinary people. Play it! So hello, here in Wakefield, at the residence of my Uncle Rog and Auntie Barbara.
Yeah.
Great Uncle Rog and Auntie Barbara.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So how this works is, I'll just turn that screen off. We just sit back and have a chat like we have done in the past.
Right.
Like any old normal conversation.
So what do you want to know? What do you want to ask me?
So I think we'll start with just travel anecdotes. Obviously you guys have travelled pretty extensively in your lives.
Well, around my furthest is to Australia, of course. Singapore.
Much further.
Australia's
Hong
pretty
Kong.
far.
We've been to.
Yeah,
Hong Kong,
okay.
Singapore. I worked for a year in Switzerland.
Oh.
But other than that, we've remained very much in England, haven't we?
Yeah.
Since we were
Since
married,
you were together, yeah.
we have had trips to Australia.
Okay.
And loved them.
Uh-huh.
And it's just so educational, it's so enlivening and enriching to see how another country operates
Yeah.
and how different people are.
So how was Australia for yourself? How did you find it? Obviously you're from there, Auntie Bob.
Oh, me?
So
It's
you quite like.
It's
You quite like it.
It's God's own country.
Well, Barbs was born in Sydney.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, okay.
I love being introduced to Australia.
Yeah.
It was good. It was lovely.
Yeah, I see. Any favourite spots for yourself?
Well,
As an
I only
Englishman going out
really know where Barbara took me, which are Sydney, and we did go to Cairns,
there? Okay, yeah.
and the Barrier Reef, Great Barrier Reef. We had a trip right up by car up the eastern side of Australia from Sydney to a place called Forster,
Okay.
which is not too far. When I say too far, it would probably be 200 miles from Brisbane, but it was way up.
Okay, yeah.
And then I always remember coming back to Sydney on the return journey. Instead of going on the coast road, we decided to go inland on the New England Highway.
Okay.
And we set off at 8 o'clock in the morning to get to the New England Highway. And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I said to Bob, we must be well on the way to Sydney now.
Yeah.
And we hadn't even reached the New England Highway,
Love it.
which was a parallel to Forster.
Jeez.
It was actually the Gold Coast. down
Yes,
there.
and
okay.
we had then to begin to descend.
Yeah.
And go. How many miles would it be?
About 600.
600 miles
Yeah.
to Sydney.
For that, it's just madness, isn't it?
Yes,
Australia.
it's so huge.
Yeah.
And when you looked on the map, it was just half an inch
Yeah,
on the
okay,
map,
yeah,
that bit
yeah.
that we'd travelled.
Yeah, that's a world map, I
And
guess.
you realise,
You're like, oh,
realise
geez.
just how far and how big the
Oh,
country is.
For sure.
And I had visions of seeing kangaroos everywhere.
Yeah,
You
okay.
know, if New England Highway, it would be remote,
Yeah,
and it wasn't at all. We didn't see a single kangaroo.
yeah.
But then Bob tells me that they usually come out at night,
Okay.
Well,
and we were
evening.
travelling during the day.
Yeah,
I see.
they sleep during
But
the
it was
day.
Yeah.
a lovely time and a lovely holiday,
Yeah,
and the people were so friendly and very warm.
okay.
Uh,
No, Australia's gorgeous.
It is.
Yeah, I was only there 3 months, but I really enjoyed
It is lovely. Yeah.
Enjoyed it in Melbourne. How about yourself, Antigua? Any favourite spots? You know?
Oh, well, Sydney's home, you know, I mean, it's,
It's a nice city.
yeah.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereabouts were you? In Sydney?
In Sydney,
Yeah.
I lived most of my life in the eastern suburbs, the Coogee-Randwick area. And then for the last 16 years, I lived in Strathfield, which is out west, but a big railway intersection. And I went there because my mother was living in the mountains and she would come down frequently.
Okay.
And it was, she could get off at Strathfield and it was more convenient for her and easier if I moved. So I went like a martyr, a total martyr,
Wow.
out to the west. But it turned out to be a lovely place to live.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes,
How,
yeah.
how far out of Sydney is that then?
Oh, it's about 12 miles from the
Okay.
centre, or from the quay. You know,
Okay, yeah,
down
yeah.
the harbour.
Yeah.
About 12 miles.
Okay, but easy enough to get into Sydney from there.
Oh, dead simple, yes,
Oh, okay.
because it was this big intersection, and I'd go down and I'd get the train in, and there might be 2 stops, you know, because it would go straight through. So
Okay.
I could be in the centre of Sydney in 15 minutes.
Wow.
So it's
Oh, perfect. So it's a best of both worlds in a
best
way.
of both worlds, yeah.
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 Yeah, fascinating.
For visiting friends and family, you're sort of like in a hub, and I was not very far from anyone then.
Yeah, okay.
But
Okay. That's cool.
but I'm still an eastern suburbs lady at
Oh,
heart.
really? Okay.
yes.
Yeah, you can't. You can take the girl out of the eastern suburbs, but you can't take the... That's great. That's great. Because then you travelled extensively though, early on, in the early years. We're talking about Cape Town.
I had, well, that was my first trip abroad.
Was it?
Yeah, and I had my 20th birthday in the middle of the Indian Ocean
Oh,
on my way over to the UK. And then I did the usual, travelling around the UK and then youth hosteling around
That's
Europe.
amazing.
Um,
What year was this, roughly?
1956, not roughly at all. It
Oh,
was
bang on.
definitely was.
Bang on.
It was
56.
1956,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
And it was a different world then, absolutely.
Wow.
Yes.
That is fascinating. And what are the biggest shifts, would you say, since the 50s here in the UK?
In the world, well.
And the world is great, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, yes. Well, even in the UK, the thing that struck me was how incredibly polite English people were,
Huh.
and that everything was clean and tidy, and nobody littered.
Okay.
And when I came back and lived for 2 years in London in 69, 70, it was almost as though there'd been a total turnaround. And it was totally the opposite. Sydney and Australia people were tidier and friendlier and more polite than they were in London.
Okay.
And,
yeah. There seems to be a bit of a continuation of that. Not gonna lie,
Yes.
even now in
Yes.
London, I was down
In
there
London
last year.
is not what it was at all. I would
interesting.
say, yeah, I'd say the whole of the UK isn't as polite as it was, and I think that's because there are too many people here.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I think people get
60 odd million in a country this size.
yeah. I mean,
is
it's a
few.
bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, there are as many people in the whole of Australia as there are in London.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
it just gets too hard.
I can see that. No, for sure.
Mm.
It's just it's so true though. It's so
Did
true.
you find that, darling, that people in Sydney were more laid back?
Yeah, oh, very much so. And the more, it's a place for young people. There are so many activities connected with the sea and water.
Yeah, very true. There's lots of,
It was just a lovely, lovely place.
We old people can paddle.
yeah, no, there's still some old surfers out there doing their thing. But yeah, agreed.
Yes, it's a young person's nirvana, I would think, to live out there. It's just
I've got a
lovely.
lot of mates out there. Yeah, my age, I think, doing that.
Yeah, and it's a safe environment, or I always considered it to be so. Whether it's changing or not,
Yeah, okay.
I'm not sure. I guess it is.
Yeah.
But when I first went, it was very different. It was lovely.
Yeah. Oh no, Australia's got some great points to it, I must say. But yeah. Well, you wanted something there, Auntie Bob, in terms of, you said like the world has changed drastically, I imagine, in the last 50 years. Well, just from what I've read and seen, but
It's
any standout
well,
things
to
that you
me,
missed
for women in particular, it's not as safe as it was.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, to me, there was always, from the very first time I travelled, right up and probably until about 15 years or more ago, if you were, I don't know quite how to put this, saying a certain type of person, but someone who wasn't going to be running around or going wild, someone who was just leading a normal average life, somehow you were safe. That protected you. The way you dressed, the way you
Worshipped, the way you behaved.
just your general behaviour and everything.
Yeah, okay.
This sort of gave you a cloak that protected you. People did not bother you. But I have seen that change, that I think young girls in particular have to be far more careful in what they say and do and dress than I ever had to, or my contemporaries had to.
Yeah.
And I find that a great shame. That
That's-
there might be more equality, but there's less freedom, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Certainly from my viewpoint, anyway.
That's interesting. Yeah, okay. Because now you find that, and it's a shame throughout India there's a lot of that with where girls are objectified a lot out there by the men out there, and it's a very cultural thing. And it's changing. It's taken a hell of a lot longer than it should, in my opinion, to change that. But
well, it's been going on for a long time also.
Very true, very true. I give it that. But at the same time, we're all, you know, we're all got the same kind of brains. So we like to, everyone says that we have at least, you know. And I also believe that's true. So yeah, with the internet and everything, we should be able to sort of get everyone on a page soon enough, you know, to go, actually that's not right. You shouldn't be doing that, you know. But yeah, that's fascinating. That is fascinating, because surely when you look at this, no, maybe not even that. Statistically, it'd be good to actually look at in the 50s if there was more crime than there is nowadays, or whether or not it's just hyped up by the media that there's X and Y. But I think you're right. I think there must be something in that.
I think there can be more copycat crime now, you know, because of the media. You know, everyone learns about these things. Where you go online or something, and where before, particularly coming from Sydney, sometimes news would be a week old before it really hit the newspapers and the radio, and that was it. I mean, in Sydney, well, the whole of Australia, there was no television till 1956.
Okay.
And that came from the Olympic Games.
Wow. Okay.
So
it was wireless radio before that.
There was and cinema. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And that's
that's a different world.
That's
a different world.
I mean, yes, we forget. I forget how old we are.
That's a good thing.
Well, that's a good thing.
It is.
I don't mind that.
Gives you a bit of a shock to realise.
Yeah. Didn't always have one of these things.
It's like when I got a cleaner, Roger wanted me to get one for a couple of years. He kept saying, you should, you know, it's too much for you. And I kept saying, that's where I come from. The only people who have cleaners are the old and the infirm. And then one day I looked in the mirror. Then I got a cleaner. It took a really hard look.
Right, give him a call. Brilliant. So, we'll switch topics. That's all right, Uncle Rog.
We switched off.
Switch topics. We're going to switch.
Oh right.
Topics.
What do you want to know now?
So we had a great chat in there earlier, three of us, about religion.
Yeah.
And obviously, so you're a canon
in
the Christian church.
In the Church of England.
Church of England.
Yeah.
Apologies. Yeah.
Yes, I was made a canon on the 50th anniversary of the NHS, because I worked for 20 years in the NHS as a chaplain in the local Wakefield hospital, and it was quite out of the blue that the bishop who was giving the address just suddenly announced that in a word of thanks for the service I'd given to the health service in Wakefield, he wanted to make me a canon in the church.
Amazing.
And that was a lovely moment. It was a really surprise, and I really valued that. It was a real thank you.
Yeah, of course.
For the effort.
Yeah. Well, 20 years is
a long
time, I must say. So what got you into that line of work?
I think probably I was training to be an hotel manager. You know, I'd worked in London at the Dorchester for many years, and was really
there's some stories there.
Going there, and I after that I decided, because I'd always searched for God. It had been a major drive within me from being a child.
Wow.
I was born just before the outbreak of the Second World War, and it was a frightening time. And as a little boy, I was brought up in a Methodist Sunday school, learned all the stories of the Bible, and I wanted to follow, as a child does, this Jesus Christ man, and I that was my purpose in life.
Amazing.
And that never left me, and wherever I went to work, I always found a local church. And my mother, when I went to work in London, was concerned for me because she said, "You must find a nice church, dear, because you'll find nice people there."
Okay.
So
Yeah,
whether
yeah.
I would or
Which
not,
is-
that was a different thing.
Yeah.
And because I think she was afraid of what else I might find in London.
With you.
And,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can
and you
imagine.
do find all kinds of
sure.
things. And
Yeah.
I made a lot of good friends at St Martin's Church in Trafalgar Square,
Oh.
and that was lovely. And part of the journey of going to church and working at the Dorchester, I was seeing two sides of life. One was the rich side, where there were very, very many people staying in the hotel who were film stars, extremely well heeled, very, very wealthy, and the hotel played on the desires and the needs of the wealthy. And I was in reception there, I was working there,
Okay.
and loving every minute of it, thinking I would one day be an hotel manager.
Wow.
But on the other side, through St Martin's, I joined a group of people who were going out visiting the lonely old people in places like Pimlico in London. And I went to visit. We should have gone in pairs, but the lad I was going with was poorly, so I went on my own and went to Pimlico to this old man called Mr. Shafto. And he was my age now, he's 70, he was 80, nearly 80, and he was crippled with arthritis.
Okay.
And I called, knocked on the door, and when he eventually arrived at the door, I was just about to leave, thinking there was nobody there. And he was so pleased to see me because he hadn't seen anybody for a very long time. And he said, "Please go to the top of the house, and I'll come up to you as soon as I can." So up I went, 2 stairs at a time, and it was a 5-story house. And when I got from the top into his little room, it just stank. It was awful.
Wow.
And I discovered that he had on his leg a wound from the First World War, apparently, that had gone gangrenous. Although it had healed, it had opened up again, and it was festering, and he was in a bad shape. And I visited him over a period of 6 months in total, and I managed to get eventually through St Martin's a doctor to go and see him, health visitors to go and see him.
Fantastic.
And eventually he went into hospital. And when he was in hospital, he was so pleased that I would go and see him, and I visited him. And one week I couldn't make it. I used to go and promise him that I'd go every Thursday, but that's all I could give him, but I would not let him down. And one Thursday I had to let him down for some reason, and I rang the hospital, and the sister answered and said, "Mr. Cressey, we've been trying to get you. I'm terribly sorry, but Mr. Shafto died in the night, but he left a message for you." And the message was, "Will you tell Roger that had it not been for his visits, I wouldn't have wanted to get better."
Amazing.
And I think that was the turning point, that moment in time when I really wondered what life was all about. And I then began to think very seriously about where my future lay. And my time at the Dorchester finished, my training there, and I came back because I wanted time to think about it. I came back to teach at my old college in Leeds, the Catering College,
Okay.
and I was there for 7 years. All that time thinking about the possibility of ordination. And I was ordained in 1975. I did 2 curacies, and then I think I was drawn to hospitals, partly because of what Mr. Shafto had gone through, and partly because a lot of my relatives on my mother's side had been doctors and nurses, and so it so happened it seemed all to fit in. The chaplain there was leaving, and he asked me if I might be interested in his job, and I said yes, I was, but I didn't think I'd had enough experience. And anyway, I went for the interview, and I asked the Archdeacon at the time if I could go for this interview. I said, "You know, I don't think I'll get the job, but it would be interesting to have the experience."
Yeah, of course.
The
Yeah.
interview. So he went, and I sold myself.
Yeah.
And,
As you do
and
in
I
an
got the
interview,
job.
yeah.
And I got the job, and I never looked back, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. I did 2 years training in theology at Chichester
Okay.
Theological College, and
How does that work then, if you don't mind me asking? I don't know anything
how
about
does what work?
the theology teaching, so you have to go
Well,
to a
you
certain
go
amount of-
first and foremost to see the bishop,
Okay.
if you think you have a calling.
Mhm.
And I felt very much so that I was, because of my relationship at the time with God, I thought maybe this is what I ought to be doing. So I
Okay.
went to say to the bishop, look, do you think it's possible that I could have a calling? And can I have it tested? So he sent me on a conference for a week to be tested. I was questioned in every aspect of my life, my
Wow.
work,
For honesty,
my
they try
sexuality, everything
Wow,
was
okay.
was explored,
Okay.
and they would be deciding whether I would be able to go forward for ordination.
Right.
And within a couple of weeks, the bishop received a letter which he sent to me to say that you have been recommended to go forward for training.
Okay.
So I had to give up my job. This was when I was still teaching, of course.
Yeah, I see.
I gave up my job and went to 2 colleges. The first was at Lincoln, where it was not very, I wasn't warmly welcomed, I thought. It was a cold day, wet day, there was nobody there to greet me. I thought this is a place that I'm not really too interested in coming to, frankly.
Okay. Yeah.
And so the following weekend I went to Chichester for an interview there, and it was a lovely warm sunny day. I knew nothing about churchmanship.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't realise that Lincoln was more Protestant than Catholic, was
Right,
more
I see.
Methodist and Anglican together,
Right.
and Church of England, and Chichester was the opposite. It was very much Anglo-Catholic. Not that I wanted that, but I felt the warmth there and was greeted on the lawn by the deputy principal, who with open arms said, you must be Roger, come on, we're waiting for you.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, perfect.
So I went in there and I
Yeah.
felt at home.
Ah, lovely.
It was very hard. Graft, I felt as if I'd moved into a monastery because I was praying every 2 or 3 hours.
Wow. Okay.
It was a complete and utter change from living a playboy life
Yeah. Okay.
to going to theological college.
Yeah.
And halfway through I thought I'd made a big mistake and I would leave, but my friend said stay on, see it through, and which I did.
Yeah.
And I never looked back. It was the greatest thing I've ever done, and it was the biggest and most satisfying
Excellent.
career I could have ever wanted.
Really? Yeah. Yeah.
And so there we are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that brought me up to my 20th year in Pinderfields, where 2 years later I retired in 2000. And I've been retired for 17 years, 18 years now.
Excellent. It's still very active. Still very active.
I have been up to now. I'm
Yeah.
just beginning to let go.
That's
At age
absolutely
2.
fine, I think. Yeah. I think that's understandable.
I've earned it, I think.
I think so too.
But it's been a wonderful career.
Oh, amazing.
And I also, I've always said, you know, if God is not a God of love, what is the point of worshipping him? What is the point of worshipping anything other than that which brings you the highest degree of enlightenment
Beautiful.
and satisfaction, which is love?
Ah,
And that's been my opinion, and that's why I want to share with people the fact that I do believe that God is love, and to embrace that and journey along that road, seeking out the love of God is the greatest thing that anybody can do.
that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
So
So
basically, that's my philosophy, really.
it's a great philosophy. I mean, you can tell it's. So we were talking earlier about the thinking it through aspect, certainly of religion, and let's take Christianity, and how to interpret the Bible and the scriptures, and the best way to do that in order to satisfy yourself and logically think things through as well.
Yeah.
So
I've read avidly too. I've read what, and I don't think anybody can.
That'll be for me. It'll be Dr. Schindler.
you sure?
Oh.
Do you want me to grab it? Is it
No.
portable?
No,
Good job. No, you're right. But yeah, no. So you're saying you're reading.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can ever really give a book to somebody and expect them to take on board
Hello.
and find what you found in it.
Agreed.
I think a person has to search through a bookshop and spend hours looking through until you find one that you think this is just right for me.
Nice.
And I've always done that, and I have never been without some form of religious book which has been part of my general reading and searching.
Okay.
And I just love doing that.
Any recommendations? You're reading books at the minute. You're reading.
Yes, I'm reading some wonderful books. I mean, this one here, the one I've suggested to you.
This one here
is Arise, My Love by William Johnston. He's a wonderful man, a wonderful writer on mysticism. He's also written a book called Being in Love, and he suggests that we need to actually know God in the same way that we know a person whom we are in love with. You have to actually work at it and see that God is worth loving, and love God as much as you would love a wife or a husband or anybody who you want to spend the rest of your life with. And once you do that, then your heart is awakened.
Wow.
Spiritually. You can read endless number of books and they can be awakened mentally. But spiritually, I think, when you love God, you are opened in a different sort of way. Let me just read this to you. It's only a very short
please.
piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a lovely piece from
take your time.
from a book called Things Hidden, Scripture as Spirituality by Richard Rohr.
Okay.
And there's a lovely, lovely ending to the book. And he says, from the words of Simeon from the 10th century, he said, "We awaken in Christ's body as Christ awakens our bodies. There I look down and my poor hand is Christ. He enters my foot and is infinitely me. I move my hand and wonderfully my hand becomes Christ, becomes all of him. I move my foot and at once he appears in a flash of lightning. Do my words seem blasphemous to you? If they do, then open your heart to him and let yourself receive the one who is opening to you so deeply. For if we genuinely love him, we wake up inside Christ's body, where all our body are all over, every most hidden part of it is realized in joy as him. And he makes us utterly real, and everything that is hurt, everything that seemed to us dark, harsh, shameful, maimed, ugly, irreparably damaged, is in him transformed, and in him recognized as whole, as lovely, and radiant in his light. We awaken as the beloved in every last part of our body. And then there's the question, just test yourselves. Do you acknowledge that Jesus, the Christ, is really in you? If not, you have failed the test.
Okay.
And it just sums up really a life of sharing and searching.
Yeah, I see.
It is glorious to me, those words.
Yeah.
And I just want to share with everybody.
That's beautiful. And it's the only thing with that, if coming from from where I'm from now and mentally,
sure.
is sort of maybe almost atheistic mindset.
Yeah.
To break that down, I love it. I think it's a beautiful sentiment.
Yes.
The issue I take with is the Christ part, in terms of this person, Jesus Christ, should be in me, and we should all, like, if it was God or it was
Buddha, if it was something else.
Exactly. So every religion seems to have different variants of it.
Just disregard
just
that.
reword that. Yeah, exactly.
Just reword that. That is God.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And we see
That's beautiful.
Christ as God. So that's why it's mentioned Christ.
Yeah. I see.
But
That's
it's
gorgeous. It's a beautiful, beautiful paraphrase.
It's what I consider
Yeah.
a worthwhile search.
Amazing.
Whatever God you follow,
Yeah.
God you follow, and if you follow that God, providing that God preaches love and compassion, then it doesn't matter who you follow.
Yeah.
If
Absolutely.
that's what you want.
That's
For
the
me,
key,
I
think.
couldn't follow anybody but Christ.
Absolutely fine.
But there are many people who follow their own path.
I think it is
of love.
just, it's understanding, isn't it? And I think, as we said earlier, each religion seems to be preaching the same fundamental
That's right.
basics.
And that's one of the things that
respect others.
William what's his name? I've forgotten. William Johnson says that most religions have at their core the love of humanity, and that's what you're into as a follower of God.
Absolutely. Nice. I think there's definitely it's encouraging for me to have this conversation. I think in terms of that, it's great
It's
to
nice
sit down
to share.
Absolutely.
And to talk.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I see the Christ differently. I see Jesus as the man and the Christ as the spirit.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
the
Oh wow.
and we talk around it and come usually back to the same conclusions. You know.
I see.
Yeah.
That's a lovely way to say it. Actually, that's a lot. I think actually that might be an easier way for me to come to terms with that concept. You know.
Yeah.
Because that's that makes a lot more sense. Because the Christ part, is so, what's the word? It's so good almost. Like it is, you can't touch that. You know, it's like, well, I kind of want to be Christ, but bloody hell, that's difficult. You know, because I've got these kind of thoughts and these kind of feelings constantly, and that's for some reason not where I should be. But again, in my head, it seems like. Please jump in here, Roger, if I'm taking it. But like so the way I see Christianity, and obviously I was brought up a Christian, my mum and dad, went to church until I was 18. And I took away great things from it, the morals and everything like that, and Sunday school, and come away really happy I did it. But since then, I've not been back to church really, certainly for the last few years.
No.
Because it's a small, like we spoke about earlier, it's quite a small church. Very old school in the way it preaches and practices Christianity, and you get bored, and there's other things that take your attention away. And I'm on my own now, and I'm quite happy with the morals I've got, and I think I'm on a good path, which is lovely.
Yeah.
And I think that again, that's probably the main thing that church gives you is set you on the right path, and look, we're here if you need you, kind of thing. It's not like but the Bible and things like that seem to me, and to yourself, like we spoke about earlier, really. Jesus, I'm sure was real. I'm sure was a person. I feel like he's been a little bit blown up with the water into wine and things like that. And you go, okay, well, it's a metaphor potentially for something that he did that was really powerful or enlightening. Great. And it seems to me like there was that gap between Jesus being alive and then the church really taking off and becoming like you said, Barbara, like a business, like this business taking off, this business side of Christianity, boom. And then everything gets a little murky, like we spoke about before. When the analogy you made was fascinating, where the chap you were speaking to, and what was it you said?
I said that we are the church.
Yeah. Could you explain that? It's a little more. I forget
the whole thing. Well, he was talking about the importance of getting people into the church, which I see as the I think he was talking about the organisation. That was my concept.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Bums on
because
seats,
you need the funds, we need the people to, carry it forward and so on. And I said, but we are the church. I mean, the congregation is the church, not the building, not the money, not the
We could do this on a field. We could do this in a field.
Yeah, you could, except we're a bit damp over here.
Yeah, agreed.
But
maybe not in Wakefield.
and I see the need for the organisation, because although there's a lot about it, I don't agree. You've got to accept it carried the gospel forward. It has, and it's given us
and it's
that.
the only way the gospel can be carried
and
forward.
it is to have some kind of organisation. But that is not the church.
Yeah. I say this about a lot of things, but maybe it's true. Like the internet and the coming about this, being able to share information. I've got people, you know, in Nepal who live on the street. I can get them on Facebook still. You know, now and again I can get in touch with them and go, what's going on? And this amazing ability now to connect with everyone and go, actually, he's got a lot more than me. That's weird. Well, is he better than me? No, he's not. Okay, well, it's different. Sure he is, but he's not better. And this guy's got a lot less than me. Is he better, or am I better than him? No, I'm not at all. So
that's right.
So this ability to everyone come together.
Stage.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a different stage.
A different stage, and everyone's a pupil. Everyone's a teacher.
Of your spirituality.
So yeah, absolutely.
But so long as you know, I think, so long as you know, and you know that God, whatever God is, call him God, call it, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever God is, he is love. And in the Christian church, you have this major commandment to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And that is the key.
Fascinating.
That is the key, and we don't do that. We don't love God and with all your power and your neighbour as yourself.
No.
And we don't do that. And if people can start and do that, I think love, because it says in the Bible that love is of God. Where God is, there is love. Where love is, there too is God.
Amazing.
We are all of that belief within the church, or should be.
Yeah. That's fascinating. That is fascinating. It's only when you say those words now, I think, because it just feels like maybe it's not taught the right way.
No.
It's not, like, it's taught great, I'm sure, if I was born 500 years ago. I'd be like, okay.
But can you imagine? Can you
what we've
imagine
got,
if
that's the beautiful word.
if there was a new level of consciousness in the world where people genuinely were won over to the idea that love is all that matters, what a different world we would live in.
Oh, yeah. Well, a utopia almost.
Absolutely.
That's what we're talking about there, really.
And wasn't this the message that Jesus was bringing?
Yeah.
That
all these
God
prophets.
is love.
Yeah.
And to try to develop in this present day and age a new consciousness in society, in the world,
It's gorgeous.
of this idea, this concept of love rather than hate
Or fear.
or fear. And to me it doesn't
Yeah.
hold up to any disagreement.
Agreed. Yeah. I think
it
we're on the
seems
same
nonsense
page
not to.
here, Uncle Roger. Yeah, absolutely.
Not to.
Yeah. That's
And therefore I
fascinating.
could not do what I'm doing.
Amazing. Just spread that word to as many people as you can, really.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's perfect. That's great. I think we could talk about religion for the next 3 hours. I think, and not be.
And not
absolutely.
be. I think it is something to do with the. I think if it doesn't happen, the church will die, as we've known it.
Yeah. In the name that we've given it.
Yes, the church. People will stop going to church. It will have to change. It won't be erased completely, because the church will return to being what Barb says. We are the church. The people, the ordinary people everywhere, are the church, or is the church.
Yeah.
You know? And they will ultimately find this way of doing it, but I think they would certainly need guidance to do that.
Yeah.
And it won't be from the head, it will be from the heart.
Nice.
It will be where love rests, I think.
Yeah. Trust and
it'll have to come.
yeah. I think I honestly think it's possible. I think Again, I think the internet is a game changer in terms of that, in terms of
absolutely.
being able to get messages out there.
Yes.
And broadcast. Anyone can. Like, I mean, what I'm doing here, I haven't put anything on the internet yet, but if and when I put this up, well, I'd like to. I'll send it you guys later. But let's say it's a couple of months. Now, for eternity, people have the opportunity to listen into this conversation right here and go, oh, that's what the three of them thought about utopia or whatever. And you go, oh, that's a nice idea. Or they can go, actually, I disagree with that. If they disagree with it, here's what you do: you write into me, and I get you on the podcast, and we talk about this, and I go,
and you see the other side of the coin.
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. And I go, oh, you make a good point there. Maybe it is all about fear, even though it definitely won't be. But you know what I mean? It'll be like, okay, and we just talk. We talk all this through. We get it all together. We've got robots and algorithms that we can do a load of things to logically give us stats and say, actually, everyone's happier if we all just get along. It turns out, here's a number on it. 100%. Yeah. So I was fascinated. There's obviously so many religions out in India and things like this.
Oh yeah.
And so many intricate little, real
the little
niche,
differences.
niche religions. There's ones that.
And I want to forsake all those little niches.
Yeah.
I want to just love.
Absolutely.
I just want to love and help people to learn how to love.
Yeah, agreed. No, I'm with you. I'll join that one for sure. But yeah, I mean, some of them are actually built to die out. Some of them you have to be born in your bloodline in this certain religion.
Yeah.
And that's the only chance you get to do it. So you can never
choose.
do it. Never choose to even be one. You go, what the? Wow. I mean, it's going to die out, or it's going to maintain itself, or get filtered down and diluted. But it's quite quirky, and I don't mind that, so long as it's not preaching bad things. I don't mind a quirky little religion, so long as the fundamental belief is the same. Again, I mean, the Quran got great messages in there, loads of them. I'm sure, and then you get the fundamentalists who are just a bit
it's the
like
same
our
with fundamentalists in every religion.
Yeah, absolutely.
They screw it up.
Yeah.
They screw it up always.
They do.
Yeah.
And do you know, I think it is because they treat their religious scripts literally.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. You
know?
Yeah.
And you can't do that. I think the Bible is one big metaphor.
Beautiful.
I think it is the language. I think we were talking this morning, Bob and I, about Adam and Eve. We were trying to determine who were the sons. Did Adam and Eve have children together? And who were they? But if you don't treat Adam as a man, but you treat him as a metaphor for mankind and womankind.
Yeah, okay.
If you are worshipping God.
Oh, nice.
If you are worshipping God, I don't think it matters that the Adam in you can worship the Adam in God. I mean, I think God loves man and woman equally.
Yeah.
And I think man and woman should love Jesus equally. Just because, but men, macho men, wouldn't dream of worshipping a man Jesus in the same way. You couldn't say that he loves a man. You know?
Yeah, that's your point.
It's a delicate issue.
Yeah.
But I don't think in terms of God's power, of God's design, of God's need, of God's gift, we should worry about that. I think he is for mankind, and that includes men and women.
Yeah, okay.
And I think if only more people could recognise that too, it would help.
Amazing.
And if they stop limiting love, I mean, what you just said means that they've limited
their
concept of love is strictly physical.
Yeah.
And that's just one aspect.
Very true. Yeah, putting limits on it.
Puts limits on it.
Putting rules on your own amount
very
of love
often,
that you can give.
yeah,
You don't know how much you got. Yeah. Oh, it's fascinating.
And very often love is construed as sex.
Yeah, okay.
In today's world.
Yeah.
And it can have nothing at all to do with sex, or it can have everything to do with sex.
Yeah.
If you're in the right relationship.
Of course. Yeah.
And if you love somebody, then I think that is the right relationship.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, I love Jack as much as I
That's
do
right.
my mum. You know,
That's right,
as you would
Yeah.
everyone. You know, and
Yeah.
your family. You know,
Yeah,
you
and
want
your
family
friends.
and
And
things.
your
Yeah, you got
Friends that you want to
mates
go and work with,
Yeah.
but in some certain quarters you don't mention that. You don't say that.
Yeah.
You know,
It's funny that.
I love Bob that I work with,
Yeah.
but to say that would be
Yeah.
construed as something immoral.
Absolutely, yeah. This is the thing because again, I think that people don't explain what they're thinking. They're too afraid in a lot
Yeah.
of ways to explain. Actually,
Yeah.
I love you, man. Oh, that's a bit weird. No, not in that way. Jesus.
know,
You
that's
the
right.
X, Y, Z. You go like, okay, well that's fine then. Yeah, agreed. I
Yeah.
kind of love you too, I guess. You go, oh,
That's
thanks,
right.
man. Yeah, it's easy. It's easy enough to say it and talk it through, but
Yeah.
it's just having the self confidence is another big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm.
Just be it, self confident. Just
Yeah.
speak your mind.
Yeah, and be
You'll
sure
be
of
all right.
yourself. That's right. Be
Mm.
sure of where your position is in the world,
Yeah.
and
Takes time.
it's the same.
It does take time. Yeah.
It's like what we were talking about earlier, though, with the travelling, you know, and
Yeah.
obviously, I think, hopefully, I'm sure we all agree what we did earlier about just that really helps, I think.
Yeah.
That really helps.
Oh,
Obviously,
it does. Yes. Yes, I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
It's the moving. It's been measuring what you've known up against something different.
Mm.
You know,
Hmm.
it's the family and all you've been taught, and then suddenly you test it.
That's a great way of looking at it.
Against something else. Yeah, and it's not that you deliberately go out to test family values, but you just have to because that's
Yeah.
where
That's
you're
what
at.
we're all about.
That's
Yeah. We've got to keep pushing ourselves.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
invariably you find out the family values are your values. Yes, you agree with it, but first you have to make it yours. You have to test it against something else.
Yeah, blind faith isn't the best way to go, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
You have to experience is king, I think, when it comes
Yeah.
I remember once in my very first curacy in Pontefract, I was going to church. It was truly I think it had to be this, but I don't know. I was going for my very first service as a new curate, having just been accepted into Pontefract Church, and it was a Sunday morning, and I was walking from my flat in Pontefract across a piece of waste ground to the church, and a man was coming towards me, and I had my cassock on, so I was in black, with my dog collar, carrying my surplice over my arm. And this man came up to me and pushed his face into mine almost and said, "You fucking black bastard."
Wow. Whoa.
And it shook me to the core.
No
I'd
doubt.
never ever experienced anything like it. And he walked off.
Whoa. Whoa.
And I thought it was a contrast of what I was about
Yeah.
and where he was.
Yeah.
And what had caused him in his life to come out with a statement like that.
Yeah.
And how far had he got to go to change?
Absolutely. Oof. Oh, that's interesting. Because you fundamentally knew deep down, you're like, wow, this is a big old character difference here.
It just shocked me.
Wow.
It just shocked me, and I
It
went into
would
church
do.
almost shaking because
Wow.
I'd never experienced anything like it before.
That's interesting. So, not quite the same extent, but I remember in Colombia, and this is a stupid drunken tale of me just walking around eating chicken alone in a city, Medellin, eating some chicken on my own, a little bit drunk. About 3 a.m. in the morning, decided to sit in a park bench on my own like an
I
idiot.
don't know how you dare do
In
that.
the dark. Well, I was stupid, I was drunk, and I had my chicken, so I was like, okay, I'll do that. Sat down, and of course, lo and behold, some kids surround me, and they're like, okay, give me some chicken. And I was like, oh, Jesus, no. I was like, of course.
I like the way you say, "Oh Jesus."
Yeah.
That's good, yeah.
It's been hammered into me. Yeah. But, so I go, oh, no, I've got to do. I said, look, no, I'm not going to give you chicken. I thought I'd give him an inch, they'll take a mile, kind of thing. So it's like, no chicken. I'll try and be the big man here. So I stand up, start walking away, and I'm walking. I felt get halfway to the taxi rank, felt a knife point on my back. Yeah, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done. It remains that way, and sorry, Mum, because you brought it to hear this, but yeah, and I remember drunkenly, lived in the moment, kind of jobby, and turned around and pushed him. Instantly, boom, pushed him back, and I said, F off. No, just really authoritatively, just boom, looked him in the eyes, F off, and then turned around and strode away. Didn't run, just strode away.
You did?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, looked around, and the guy was just stood there like
Shocked.
yeah, face aghast. And I remember, but that instant when I felt that thing, and I did that, and like you, the whole body shook, and I knew, wow,
Yeah.
because there's a difference in where we're at. I mean, there's a middle class farm boy from England, sort of walking around South America, everything's beautiful, and there's a desperate guy who's, Jesus, got a knife out for some chicken. It's like, wow, and that was a big shift, and I still felt that. Obviously, I dealt with it in a stupid way. But
I'd have given him the chicken.
oh yeah, no, I'd have given him the chicken. If I was sober, I'd have given you the chicken, by the way, my friend. So yeah, next time just ask me for some. But yeah, no, stupid. But that feeling, yeah, hopefully I can, it's kind of similar, I guess. But that like, oof, and your hands sweating, and you go, that was powerful, Yeah, that was intense. That was an intense day out for sure.
I think.
Yeah. But yeah, no, this is great. Should we do the book? Should we, let's do some plugging.
Yeah, if you want to.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
I'll give you a copy.
Oh, I've got a copy
Oh,
of
you've
that.
got a copy.
Yeah.
Well,
So we'll just explain about, so you're an author as well?
Well,
Rog.
yes,
I loved it.
my nephew, my great nephew, Tom.
Tom O'Brien.
Yes, when he was 7, Anne-Louise and Chris, my niece and her husband, asked Barbara and I if we wouldn't mind if we could possibly go and babysit. They were going out and they wanted somebody just for one night to sit with Tom.
Okay.
So we went over, and Tom said, "Will you tell me a story, Uncle Roger?" Now, I had always remembered that my dad, when he came home from the forces in the war, used to tell us stories about a camel called Milkana.
Okay.
And he would sit there and he would make up these stories as he went along, and we were sitting there absolutely glued to the stories of Milkana. And it was that in mind that I began to tell Tom, making it up as I went along, the story of a little giraffe.
Oh wow.
A little giraffe. A little
Oh,
giraffe called Umph. And he was called Umph because if you can imagine a giraffe's big floppy lips, he goes Umph. You see, and he was tickled by this. So we called him Umph, and Umph was his name. And I said Umph had just been born on the plains of Kilimanjaro in Africa, and he was just beginning to feel his independence. He was able to stand and walk around his mum's legs and in between, and he was loving every moment of it. When suddenly, during the night, he was kidnapped. He was stolen, and his mum didn't realise he'd been stolen, and he was taken away, and he was transported by 2 wicked men in a van across the plains of Kilimanjaro, and he was taken to England, where he was put in a zoo. And the zookeeper's name was Mr. Thomas O'Brien.
Oh wow. That's all right.
And it was in a place called Chippleton in Yorkshire.
Okay.
And it is a wonderful zoo, but he was taken there. And the story continues, so be it, that he was so much loved by the children of the zookeeper at the time that they were astonished that by loving, the more love they gave to this little creature, the more it seemed that he was able to communicate with them.
Oh.
Not in any way in words or
okay.
sounds, but things happened to them, almost coincidental, that they made them realise that they were receiving a message from the animal kingdom, and they had to do what they were perceiving was they were being told.
Okay.
And they quickly learned, after loving this little creature for some time, that Umph was trying to tell them to help him to get back to Africa, because he was such a very special creature in the animal kingdom that they needed him.
Okay.
And so the children devised a way, simply, if they were stuck in some knowing what to do, they would go together to sit with Umph in his little shed
Okay.
and surround him and think quietly, like prayer.
Yeah.
But they would think, and suddenly they would come up with the idea.
Yeah.
And one day there was an old gentleman who lived quite near, and I can't remember his name now, but an old gentleman
Mr.
called
Wormold.
Mr. Wormold.
Okay.
Mr. Oldworm, I called him.
Okay.
The children nicknamed him Mr. Oldworm.
Uh-huh.
And Mr. Oldworm said to them one day, "Children, do you want an old balloon basket that I've got? It's in my shed and I don't want it anymore. Would you like to have it?" So he gave them this balloon basket, and they suddenly realised that this is what they had to do. So they planned Umph's escape, and they would take him themselves by air in a basket back to Kilimanjaro in Africa.
Amazing.
And they set about having all kinds of different techniques. They had a fete, and they had a fair, and they raised money from people. They got people to buy balloons, hot air balloons, and they found a man who worked with hot air balloons, little ones.
Yeah.
So they bought hundreds upon hundreds and attached them to the basket, and they set off on this journey, great journey, with little sitting in the basket and setting off, and they went to Africa, back to Africa, and that was basically
That's great.
the story,
That's
how
lovely.
they got him back.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And the adventures on the way, and the preparations of the basket,
Yeah.
and they ran into storms and crises, and nearly fell into the sea, and the birds and all the animals
Excellent.
on the journey helped them to continue the journey and get back. And then there was a little letter waiting them when they got back, and they were astounded to realise, because one of the birds, a very special bird, had been sending messages to other birds' flocks throughout the world
Oh,
that
delightful.
Umph was returning to Africa,
Oh, wow.
because Umph was the king of the jungle animals. Just as the lion was the king, Umph was the wise counsellor,
Oh,
and
excellent.
they couldn't live without him.
Oh, that's
And
a great.
he had to get back
Yeah.
to give advice to the world, to the animal world, and animal kingdom.
Oh, excellent.
And so that's how they got him back. And Mr. O'Brien had sent a letter to the people of Kilimanjaro. And on the way they had when the balloon burst, they let it float to the ground, and they had other balloons that they could blow up and fasten on. And so they did that. They pumped helium gas into the balloons,
Okay.
kept it
That's
going.
smart.
But all these little filtering little balloons that died, got empty, they had a label attached to them. So all the children of Africa were picking them up and making pen friends with the children in England.
Look at this, it's all connected, this,
all
isn't
And
it?
it was all
Jeez.
connected, you see.
Yeah.
And Mr. Wormold,
Layers.
Mr. O'Brien sent a letter to the people of Kilimanjaro saying what a wonderful experience it had been having Umph in his
That's awesome. So, and this is published?
Yeah. Well, only privately.
Yeah, I see.
So they can't sell it
Yeah.
unless it's requested.
Okay.
It can only be sold and publicised if people will send reviews in.
Oh, right, okay.
And I don't know whether people have.
I
And
see.
you go into the internet now and get it.
Oh, you can. You can get this widely. Oh, excellent.
Yeah, but you've got a copy.
I've got a copy, a
It's all right.
signed copy as well.
So
No,
read it.
that's going to be that.
Read it and see what you can do. It will be
I've
lovely.
read it already.
Yeah.
No, that's I'm saving that one for my kids.
It
If
will be
anyone out
lovely.
there fancies a copy, look at that. I mean, that is probably the best salesman
Yeah.
job you could have done there.
Yeah.
So we'll put this on the internet, and we'll get this.
Good idea.
Nepotism. It works.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's
Oh,
awesome.
yes.
That's great. Well, thanks, guys. No, we can leave it there. I think.
Yeah, okay.
We'll continue to chat.
That's lovely.
But,
Do you want another cup of tea? All right.
I will have another cup of tea if that's all right.
Another cup of tea? Coffee?
That'd be great. A cup of tea would be grand.
Bankwood Bear Productions.
Cheap and chill.